If you dig a too shallow pod, you risk finding all your Azolla floating on the ground because of flooding. If the pond is too deep, your Azolla won't get enough nutrients from the manure you're using and you may not harvest on time. So, my profit farmers, how deep should your Azolla pod be? The standard depth of your Azolla pod should not go beyond 2 feet deep because Azolla thrives best in shallow waters. But you can also dig a pod measuring 1.5 feet deep, 1 foot deep, or 30 centimeters deep, depending on the location or site of your pod. That is, if you will be using an artificial or natural shade. Number 2, if there are possibilities of flooding. Number 3, whether you will use a raised or underground pod will determine how deep you can go. For example, I chose this location for this pod because it has a natural shade from the trees, the fence, and the walls of this building. I loved the shade from the passion fruit vine because I used this portion of land maximally by number 1, selling the passion fruits, and 2, lowering the cost of my chicken feeds through this Azolla. Again, my Azolla is safe from any harm by people or animals that would damage my investment. Now, although this is a perfect location for my Azolla pod, I had a limitation on how I would dig the pod. You cannot tell by the lens of the camera, but my land is slanting on one end, with one side higher than the other. So when we first dug the pod, we aimed to dig at least 1 foot to use the very little amount of water and manure. After digging the pod for about 1 feet deep, we placed the dam liner and of course we added the water, but all unto us. No matter how much water we filled, it was only going to the lower side to the point of overflowing, while the upper side did not have any, even a drop, like it was empty. This forced us to again remove the dam liner, deepen the higher side, and align it to the lower side so that the water could level up. If the pond were in a slanting area like this, then we would not have the problem of aligning the pond, since we would be working with the same level. But we were restricted by the fence, the trees, the shade, and the wall of the building, and could only dig it looking how it is looking now and work with the depth based on the ground levels. Finally, we ended up digging 3 feet deep on the higher end and 2 feet deep on the lower end, and I decided I will not fill the entire pod with water to the surface, since that would mean using almost 3,000 liters. So we are currently using only 1,000 liters, which goes to about 1 foot deep. Something to keep in mind when deciding the depth of your Azolla pond is that the depth will determine the amount of water you use and also the amount of manure you're going to apply. This means that although our pond is 3 feet deep, we are getting the best results, that is, high amounts of Azolla during harvests, without using too much manure and water. The point to note here is that Azolla can do well in highly shallow waters if it is getting all the nutrients it needs to grow. It can even grow in damp soils, but it has a risk of drying if the soils dry up. But remember, if you experience floods in your area, we always leave room for the water to fill in without carrying your Azolla down the stream, okay? As you can see, your location will play a huge role in how deep your Azolla should go, Azolla pod should be. I don't experience flooding in my location except for the water that gets held up by the greenhouse paper on top for my shade when it is raining heavily, but it has happened for some of my customers whom I advise to use 2 to 3 feet deep ponds to give the excess water enough room to occupy without damaging the Azolla. The depth also depends on how heavy it rains and how heavy the plants are in this location. So if you're using a raised pod like the HDP, trough, containers, or an old tank, 30 centimeters depth of water is enough. And if you're using wastewater from your fish pond, then you can go up to 5 feet deep because you have enough, plenty, and nutritious water to use. So my profit farmers, as you can see, the depth of the pod depends on so many factors. But if you need further clarification on how deep you should go, depending on your specific location or wherever you are, leave a comment below and I will get back to you in due time. Now that you have an idea of how deep your pod should be, it's time now to go and make the pod. And for more information on how to do this and to make a good Azolla pod, click on the video on your link and I will see you over there. Also remember to subscribe, share and comment. Okay? Mniambie ninafanya kazi poa, sababu ninawapea information poa, sivyo? Yes, tupatane kwa hiyo video ya kutengeneza pod, na pia tupatane kwa video next yenye tutatengeneza. Bye.